Welcome back to Bibles and Bullhorns, the Evangelism Podcast. I am Jonathan Morris with Iron Outreach in Pottstown, PA. With me, as always, Jon Neifert with Tulip Gospel Outreach in Pella, Iowa. John, what do you have to say for yourself today?
Yeah, it's starting to get towards spring, and I'm really looking forward to that. A little bit warmer weather here once in a while.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could just live vicariously through Mark out in California. One way or another, we're going to get some warm weather here.
We're recording in early February, and we're like, I think 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. That's always like my thing. Like I'm always looking for when they report, because that's how I know like hope is on the way. Like there might be like 2 feet of snow outside, but if pitchers and catchers are reporting to Florida, I'm good mentally. I'm good. You mentioned Mark, by the way.
This is actually Groundhog's Day that we're recording on, so we might have to play this intro over and over and over.
Yeah. It's gone so well. People are going to want to see it like 47, 50 times in a row, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned I moment ago. I want to get to that. So we've mentioned this on the podcast a couple of times actually. There's this trend that it seems like every time we get together and do one of these things, and it's never really on purpose, with the exception, I guess, of the first episode we did with Eddie Roman. But inevitably, every time we get together and do one of these podcasts, the conversation eventually turns towards Living Waters and the evangelism ministry that they have in California. So it's an organization that I think has really had an immeasurable impact on evangelism here in America and in some other countries as well. We're very pleased today to have the opportunity to talk to the senior vice president of Living Waters, Mark Spence. He's also a host of the Living Waters podcast, which I definitely suggest people listen to if you're into evangelism and other theological topics. And he's also going to be appearing, John, at your Tulip Time Gospel Outreach this May in Pella, Iowa. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We'll talk about some of the things that Mark's done, but we'll right at the event we're going to have him highlight some of that work and bring that in more depth to those who come and attend there as well.
Awesome. So Mark, we want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, well, it's an absolute honor to be with you guys. We're talking about spring right around the corner, which means I've purchased a bunch of new birdhouses that are all throughout my backyard and my front yard, and bird feeders and bird baths. And I absolutely love being outdoors and hearing the birds. So every morning I have this huge window where all the birds, all the beautiful noises of the birds wake me up in the morning. I love it. So I'm excited for spring to come my way as well.
Okay, so we have to go back and redo the intro and introduce you as a member of the Audubon Society, apparently. Mark, last year, you guys published a project that I know you were an integral part of. I believe you were actually the producer. It was called What Is It?, which is available on YouTube for those who haven't seen it. And basically the idea behind this production is you go out and you do, some of the evangelism that you guys ordinarily do with Living Waters, but the angle is specific to the topic of abortion. And the documentary kind of starts off with you trying to get people to sign a clipboard for late-term abortion, but like super late, like after the baby is born. And you actually successfully get some people to sign up for that, which, by the way, is mind-blowing, like absolutely mind. You're sitting there watching that thinking, like, are these people even listening? How did this project come about, and what's been the response to it that you've heard so far from the public, those who've seen it? Do you have any stories, of people who've been impacted by it?
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Listen, during COVID, my son Nathaniel, who is one of the producers, he edited the whole film. It was really kind of his idea, his brainchild. And during COVID, he said, "Hey, Dad, let's go witnessing down at the beach." And so we went down to the beach, and we saw a black gentleman holding a black flag that said Black Lives Matter. And then he had a mask on that said Black Lives Matter, and he was dressed in Antifa sort of apparel. So I went up to him, and I had two of my sons with cameras, kind of from a distance, and I was mic'd up, and I said, "Hey, do you believe that Black Lives Matter?" And he goes, yes. And I said, well, do all Black lives matter? And he said, of course. And I said, well, how do you feel about abortion? And he said, well, I think it's a woman's right to choose. I go, to choose to murder her preborn? I go, so you don't care about all Black lives. Why don't you say some Black lives matter on your flag? Because I would come from the position that all Black lives matter and everybody's life matters. So we engaged in a conversation, and we ended up putting that on our YouTube channel. That was going to make it into the film, but because he was wearing a mask, we didn't want to date the film. So we put it on our YouTube channel separately. And it didn't do very well, actually. It had less than 100,000 views. I think it was like 80 or 90,000 views that was on it, which is not very many for our YouTube channel. But this is the example that I like to give. And let me give you the premise of the film here. Imagine waking up early on a Saturday morning with your son calling out to you from the other room with just a simple question. Hey, Dad, may I kill it? Now, without any of the context, you'd probably respond back and say, hey, Charlie, what are you talking about? What is it that you want to kill? Right? If Charlie responds back and says, Daddy, there's a big, ugly cockroach on the wall. May I kill the cockroach? You would then respond back and say, absolutely, take dominion, clean it up before Mama wakes up, and don't show your sister Sally. If, on the other hand, if Charlie responds back and says, no, Dad, you don't understand. I am talking about my sister Sally. Sally is driving me crazy about her talk on dolls. May I kill Sally? Well, with an emphatic no coming from your lips, and then you'd wake up your spouse in a frenzy saying, hey, babe, get the pastor on the horn because our little Charlie is turned into Chucky. He wants to kill his sister, right? So examine what's taking place here, right? Before we can answer the question on whether or not Charlie can kill whatever it is he's talking about, we need to answer the question, what is he talking about? And even so, before we can answer the question on whether or not we may allow a woman to kill whatever is inside of her womb, we need to answer the question, what is it? And so using science, which is basically the law of biogenesis and the law of embryology, then using philosophy, the murder of innocent human life is always wrong. Abortion is the taking of innocent human life, therefore abortion is always wrong. That's the philosophy side of it. And then using more importantly, and the most importantly, is the Bible, because this is a gospel-centric issue. And using the Bible, I went out on the street and I just engaged in conversation with people to see where they stand. And then once people were changing their minds on abortion, I got into the spiritual side of it. Does your worldview, your spiritual beliefs have any bearing on what you believe concerning abortion and things of that nature? And so that's kind of the premise of the film. And we're showing it. There's hundreds of churches that have shown the film. I was just up in Sacramento at Jack Hibbs' son-in-law's church, and I showed the film there this past Sunday. And in a couple of weeks, I'm at a local church here, but we're here in all kinds of churches kind of shelf the regular service to show the film. And we're really excited about it. So, What is it?
Yeah, no, that's really powerful, right? If you haven't seen it and you're listening here, then maybe stop this, go watch that, and then come back, because it's just that.
We'll be here when you're
film to watch.
we'll be here when you get mad. But
Right.
hey, Mark, how did this issue become? Because when I think of the Living Waters team, and I love listening to all you guys and respect all of you, on that team, you seem to be the guy who is most focused on this issue. How did this become? I hate to call it a pet issue, but how did this become like the issue that like perhaps dominates a lot of your thinking and your evangelism?
There's a saying that if you can't get the issue of life right, then you can't get anything right in life. So I don't know if I'm the only one. I mean, Ray obviously has 180, and I had edited and produced that film. Easy is very passionate about the pro-life movement as well. He speaks at a lot of pro-life galas as well, not just myself. I think for me, I'm kind of putting together a lot of moral dilemmas, if you would, because my style of evangelism is different than Ray's style of evangelism. Ray's style of open-air preaching is different than my style or Easy's style or Oscar's style. So my style is really on an intellectual level. My ideal person to talk to would be maybe a philosophy professor, yeah, on a college campus. The smarter, the better. And not because I'm extremely intelligent, but it's just kind of the realm that I enjoy speaking in. And I really have to keep guard of my heart and not just stay in that realm of the intellect and go for the conscience, right? I really want to make it that realm, but I want to demonstrate that Christianity is intelligent, right? Christianity can handle the hard-hitting questions that come our way. And I learned that from a prominent apologist who died not too long ago, when I heard him say that he went onto the college campus and he said, listen, I believe Christianity is intelligent. It can handle your questions. Does anybody have any questions? So I've kind of adopted that into my vernacular. And in that realm comes all sorts of bioethical issues, from euthanasia to abortion to drug use and everything else in between. So if it's out there and it's hot, I want to deal with it. Everything's a springboard, really, for the gospel.
Yeah, Mark. That's one question, right? I mean, you say everything's a springboard, right? And you see in your film, right? You're using that abortion issue, right? Life and death, and so on, to kind of springboard into the gospel, right? You know, you see that clearly. Talk about that and how you've approached maybe some other topics too, to transition from whatever hot topic there is today into the gospel, because that's really dealing with the conscience, and that's what really gets to the heart of people.
Yeah. If the film did not have the gospel, I would not have produced the film. We have to remember that. It's not difficult to get somebody to change their mind on their worldview. Just because Christianity is intelligent, it's easy to paint somebody into a corner. But that's not our job, to paint people into corners. We want to give them the gospel, which is the power of God into salvation. So when the film 180 was produced, it was 33 minutes. But 13 of those 33 minutes is the gospel. Well, we had a very prominent public figure come and watch the film. And he said, listen, you guys know that I'm a Christian. I'm passionate about the pro-life movement. I'm passionate about the gospel. Remove the gospel. I'm not saying that we don't want the gospel out there, but I'm saying that more doors will open up to you if you remove the gospel, and then it'll drive people to your website or to your YouTube channel. Well, they'll be exposed to the gospel even more. So I'm telling you that I can get you on Hannity and Combs and CNN and everything else, because they don't know that this is a gospel-centric issue. So you'll get more people. So he was trying to demonstrate the ability to be as wise as a serpent, as harmless as a dove, right? That was his motive. And he really is very evangelistic. We've gone out several times. He hands out gospel tracts. And I remember when this gentleman had left my office, Ray looked at me and he said, what if we put it on YouTube and it has 500,000 views and the gospel is never heard? Listen, you have a better chance at getting me to floss the back teeth of a lion at the San Diego Zoo during feeding time than get me to remove the gospel. Everything I do, I want it to be included with the gospel, right? So when I'm out on the streets and I engage in dialogue with people, they may not know, well, they typically don't know what angle I'm coming from, that I'm a Christian. I'll say something along the lines of, hey, listen, I have a YouTube channel. I put people in a moral dilemma, and then I try to see how people will respond to that. Let me give you an example of the moral dilemma. This isn't the moral dilemma that I'm going to give you, but this is a moral dilemma that, so you can see what angle I'm coming from. They say, sure, go for it. And I say, imagine, if you would, your apartment backs up into next door to a bank vault. and you find a secret passageway that leads on into the bank vault. You can jump in there at night, steal $1 million, and you will not get caught. Would you sneak in there, get the $1 million if you knew you wouldn't get caught? So that's a moral dilemma. I'm going to put you in a moral dilemma and see how you're going to.
Is that a real $1 million, or is it a $1 million tract?
Or a gospel million? That's funny. But I do that, and then I have tons of moral dilemmas that I put people in, and then they end up asking me, well, what would you do? And the one that I'm working on right now, it deals with abortion, actually. And this example that I give is, I go up to guys for this one, and I say, hey, guys, imagine if there's this girl before you, and she's a 10, right? She's absolutely gorgeous, and she wants to get together with you in a way that you want to get together with. One catch. When you're done, about a month later, you're giving her the right to kill one of your family members. Would you do it? She's a sure thing. She wants to get together with you, but now you're going to give her the right to kill one of your family members. And I'm getting responses of people saying, one of my family members, if it was my mother-in-law, sure. Yeah, no problem with that. But what do you mean? And I say, okay, well, that's a good question. I'm going to say that it's a child. Perhaps your firstborn. I don't know. And they all say, no, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. And I go, how do you feel about abortion? I think it's a woman's right to choose. Back to our moral dilemma. So that's one that I'm working on right now. It's a video that I'm working on. And
this is cool.
Yeah.
Mark, do you feel like, as it relates to this issue, is there any hope for this country at the ballot box, or does this have to come from hitting the streets and sharing the gospel? Because we know that we know the gospel has the power to change hearts and minds, or Christ does anyway through the gospel. But is there any hope for us on election day, or should we really be turning our attention not towards campaigning for a specific issue, but just sharing the gospel and discipling the nations as we're called to do in the Bible?
Yeah, I say everything that you have the ability to do. We occupy until he comes. You should vote. You should share the gospel. You should just whatever you do, right? The steps of a righteous man are ordered by the Lord. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was on our board at Living Waters for several years, I think for 10 plus years. And when he became the Speaker of the House, he contacted us and he said, hey, man, regretfully, just because I'm so busy, I need to step down from Living Waters. But he has an agenda within the pro-life arena to be able to get in. And some of the direction where he wants to head is not a direction where I would head. Right? But he's heading that direction. I go, well, that's kind of him. That's what he wants to do. And that's the direction he wants to head. When Ken Ham interviewed or debated Bill Nye, the not-so-science guy, Ken had asked me the question, who do you think is going to win the debate? And I said, I think whoever shares the gospel is going to win the debate. And I'm not expecting too much from Bill Nye. And he did share the gospel. And he didn't share the gospel exactly the way I would have shared the gospel. And he went down different directions that I would not have taken. But Ken Ham was perfect for the job. How do I know that? Because he's the one that God set up for the job. Right? So I think that we do what we can, and we allow people to be people. So if you have the ability to vote for people in office, or to not vote for that candidate, or to run for city council, anything and everything is a good thing to use as long as it's not sinful. So there you go.
There you go. Yeah. Mark, you've talked a little bit about your kids, right, and their involvement and so on in evangelism and some of the other things that you're doing, right? we all have different things we're trying to learn and grow in evangelism and in our theology, a lot of different things there too, right? What kind of recommendations would you give, or what experience have you seen in bringing your kids along, helping train them up in the gospel, in evangelism, whether that's your kids or other young people and situations you've seen? What advice would you give
Yeah.
to maybe parents or other Christian leaders who want to do that?
Yeah. So twofold, right? It's the training and the rising up and the sitting down, that you're always training. When you think that when you sit down for a family devotion, that's the only time of training, you're kidding yourself. Your kids are studying you, and you should be studying your kids. Your kids should also know, as Todd Friel says, that that you're the biggest sinner in the house. Your kids and your wife should know that. Not because you're sinning in a grandeur, grotesque way, but because they are continually hearing you say, I messed up, I blew it, I didn't redeem that time over there. They're always hearing that. And then they're always hearing about you talk about how great your God is. But God, but God, but God. So I messed up. I should have given a gospel tract to that person. I didn't do it. I messed up. We'll get the next one, kids. So the kids are always hearing about how you're messing up and you're receiving God's grace, and how you're always on display, whether it be you're at the grocery store or you're giving somebody else their right of way to park in that parking spot that you've been waiting on, that everything is just kind of ordained by God in a beautiful, beautiful way. So I don't want to negate those two facts, that as they sit down, as they stand up, everything's a teachable moment. I'm off to the grocery store to pick up a gallon of milk. I ask one of my kids, hey, you want to come with me? They don't want to do it. I have a family devotion. Kids can't do it. I'm doing it with my wife and maybe one of my kids, as my other kids are doing schoolwork in the corner or whatever it may be. It depends on age things, but they're always watching me. So they're studying me. I'm studying them, and I'm excited to shoot them out into the world. And they all love God by the grace of God. So not all my kids want to open air preach. Let me tell you, only one has, but they are all evangelists. They all share the gospel. And I love it. They put me to shame, really.
Right.
What's been their and I've taken my kids out evangelizing a lot of times, and sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and sometimes they run to it. Kind of just I don't know, they're kids. They can fluctuate a little bit. What's been your experience for people maybe out there who are used to evangelizing themselves but haven't figured out yet how to incorporate their children? What's been your experience with like how to get started in such a thing?
Yeah, it's the rising up and the sitting down. It's everywhere you go, you have gospel tracts with you. You encourage them. Like the first time I open air preached, it was in Las Vegas, and Ray said, hey, Mark, do your little sleight of hand light show. So I got up there, and then Ray said, hey, Mark, tell me how you became a Christian. And he forced me to open air preach. And then one time we were in Hollywood, and Ray had to leave pretty soon. And he said, hey, that's a very good question, young man, that you just asked me. My friend Mark would like to answer that question. And he just kind of provoked me. He pushed me up there. And then there was another time where we were out there. Ray was open air preaching. I didn't want to open air preach. Ray had to leave. And this girl got up and she started open air preaching. And I was just provoked within me. She's doing it. I can do this. I know that I have some better answers. I know that I just need to step out of the boat. So with my kids, they should see me evangelizing. It's not just a Friday night or a Saturday night encounter. It's time for Dad to go evangelize. You want to come with? No, as they're going out with me, they're seeing things take place. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go, hey, why don't you go throw a couple gospel tracts, over inside those coat pockets over there in that department store. I'll get these ones over here, or put them inside books, or we pay for the person behind us as we're going through a drive-through. or whatever it may be, just creative ways. And so the kids are always trying to be creative. And I give them an endless supply of gospel tracks.
There you go. Yeah.
So they like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, honestly, it helps that truth be told, we don't do this because it's fun, but actually when you get going, it's actually kind of a great time to go out and hand out tracks to people. But I've heard, you were talking here about like instances where you almost had a little bit of stage fright with it or a desire not to do it. And I've heard Ray say many times, this is something I don't want to do. Right. But yet we're called to do it. So, and I know when I go out, I might plan, a specific time in a specific place, and I'll drive there. People are surprised to hear this. Like I do evangelism training, and they're shocked to hear this come out of my mouth. But I'll drive there, and then I'll get to the parking lot, and I'll put the car in park, and I'll kind of like look around at the area, and I'll be like, I can't do this. I can't get out. I can't do like. And then I have this like fight with myself in my head for a couple of minutes. Like it's something I've never done before, and I could never do. So. How do you, when you have that reluctance, so you're basically talking about pushing the baby bird out of the nest. How do you, when you're the baby bird, how do you push yourself out of that?
Yeah, so the first time I went open air preaching with Ray Comfort was at the Balboa Fun Zone. And I was thinking to myself the whole time, how is he going to start? How is he going to start? Is he going to walk all the way around the perimeter? Is he going to pray over this place audibly? What's going to happen? We get to the location, he gets up on this soapbox, and he just starts preaching. And I went, whoa, I didn't even know we were starting. He just started to go. And then afterwards, I hit him up. And I said, you didn't waste any time. And he said, you can't. And it's not because of this. I often said, you can't waste time because there's no time to waste. He said, if you begin to think about it, you'll talk yourself out of it. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that. They're inside my film. What is it? There's these 3 girls that I talked to. They're all wearing bathing suits. They're underneath the pier. The one redhead, she ended up getting an abortion. She confesses that at the end of the film. But that day, I went down to the beach, and I'm sitting in my car for 2 hours. I'm in my head. I can't get out of it. I'm not motivated. I have zero desire to be there. All my friends are out doing something else. My family's doing something amazing. I'm hungry. I finally leave the car. I go down to the pier. I walk up and down the pier a couple times. I walk along the boardwalk. I go underneath the pier to get some shade from the pier. It's hot. And I'm like, I do not want to be here. I texted 11 other people and asked them to pray for me. Said, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Like, all right, well, I'm just going to go hand out a couple of gospel tracks.
It was a waste of time trying to text them and wait for them to answer, and you just had to get out there, right?
He was running out the clock, yeah.
I saw these 3 girls, and these 3 girls are looking at these volleyball players, and they're gawking at these volleyball players with no shirts on. And I hit them up, and I just simply said, hey, would you like to come on my YouTube channel? I'd like to put you inside of a moral dilemma and see how you're going to handle it. And they said, sure, why not? Let's go to the end of the pier, underneath the pier, towards the water. Let's go over there because we don't want to be seen with an old man. That's what they said. And so we went there, and I talked to them, and it was absolutely amazing. And the redhead who had an abortion was the only one that I have their email address still. And I'm looking to reach out to her to see if she's seen the film yet. Yeah. But don't talk yourself out of it. It's easy to talk yourself out of it.
Yeah, I like that advice. Just jump in, right? Your example from Ray. I remember struggling through that same question right when I was new at this and right open air. It's like, what do you say? And you try and listen to others and see what they're doing to start and everything else. But in the end, just that advice to jump in and do it, right? Usually I give a very short intro. I'll say, my name is Jon. I'm here to share the gospel. And then I just jump right in. I mean, that's 5 seconds or less, right? Hopefully, right, sharing my name makes a little bit of a personal connection, but it's not really much. But really love
nice.
that.
Hey, Mark, you were mentioning before about different styles of evangelism. I was wondering if we can kind of like pick your brain on that. And you're right. If I watch like a Way of the Master or something, watching you deliver the message versus Oscar versus Ray versus Easy, they can all be a little bit different. Um, how much room is there, like in this? I think in our modern like evangelism culture, we were talking before about the impact that Living Waters has had, and I think that most evangelists kind of still gravitate towards the use of the law to demonstrate sin, which is kind of like the focal point of the Living Waters ministry. So, how much room for variation is there, and is it important for us, no matter what our personal style of conversation is, to still get to the law ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, we must use the law to bring the knowledge of sin. The Apostle Paul said that. All the Puritans said that. And we must not use life enhancement as a draw card for salvation. In other words, come to Jesus and he'll improve your life. Jesus is better than MTV and sex. All right. We need to be careful on the message that we present, because it's not about riches, but it's about righteousness. And without the righteousness of Christ, somebody will perish on the day of wrath. But then it comes along where we have different personalities, different characters. Like, you're not going to typically see me trying to draw a crowd to do open air preaching by handing out money, right? That's not something that I do, but I have a lot of friends that like to go down that route. They like to draw the biggest crowd possible before they end up sharing. I don't do that. What I like to do is, if I'm going to open air preach, and I rarely open air preach, and I'll explain that to you in just a moment if you want to hear, I will use the springboard of common objections that come up against Christianity to try to draw a crowd. You know, I'll say something along the lines of, listen, I'm a Christian. I'm not ashamed to be called a Christian. Christianity is intelligent. It can handle your hard-hitting questions. So whether you're an atheist and you adhere to the tenets of the flying spaghetti monster, or maybe you're part of the Baha'i faith and you think Baha'u'llah and Jesus are just messengers, or perhaps you're a Muslim and you think Jesus is just a prophet, you're part of the New Age and Jesus is just a spiritual enlightened being, or you're a Mormon and you think, you know, Jesus is the spirit brother of Lucifer, or Michael the Archangel if you're Jehovah's Witness. We are not enemies here today, but I believe that you're wrong. And I think that Christianity can handle your questions. Come around. Perhaps your question is, how can you trust the Bible because it's written by men? Or how can a God of love send somebody to hell? Or, and then I just started throwing things out there. And I say, these are really good questions. And I'm not going to answer those unless that's your question. If that's your question, let me know and I want to answer it. But I don't want to waste your time answering a question you don't want to have an answer for. So, like, sir, you, for example, what do you think happens after we die? We turn into penguins. Interesting. How about you? What do you think happens? And like, I could have kept going with that guy. I said, hey, how about you? If God is a kind, loving God, why do the innocent suffer? What do you think? You ever think about that? No, maybe you should. It's $1 million question. How about you over here? What do you think happens? Yes, you. No, not her. You. What do you think happens? And I try to invoke the crowd to get into it. And I think that that's kind of my personality, if you would. So there you go.
And you said you were going to get to why you rarely open air preach.
Yeah, Ray Comfort open air preaches, I think, once a year. And that once a year is at the Ambassadors Academy. He doesn't open air preach beside that. It's not because he's ashamed of the gospel. It's because remember, why do we open air preach? It's to reach the greatest amount of people possible. That's why. So if I have the ability to speak one-on-one or 5-on-1, I'm going to choose the 5-on-1 if there's an option. So open air preaching gives me the ability to talk to 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 people. That's amazing. And a good open air preaching session will reach more non-believers than your local church will in a given year. So why don't I do that more? Why doesn't Ray do that more? Well, with the advent of YouTube and social media, we have the ability to reach a lot more people. So we may not have the ability to reach 100 people down at the pier, but we can reach one, and then that one can reach a couple 100,000 people on our YouTube channel. Now, when we open air preach, we cannot use amplification down at the pier. So if we were to just film ourselves open air preaching, we can get a lot of hatred from Christians who say, listen, I don't like the way you're yelling. I don't like the way that, blah, 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 blah. But when you do one-on-one, it's a lot more personable.
Mm-hmm.
I go, granted. So we are able to remove this hostility aspect if we were to upload an open air preaching session. Now, that's not to say that I won't open air preach. If there's a big group of people in an area, I'm not a fan of a captive audience, which means, like, for example, if I'm here and there's a bunch of people at an outdoor patio restaurant, they're captive. They can't leave. I might be on public property and I can herald to those people. I typically won't do that because I know that they went there to enjoy their meal. I might, and I have done it, but I might say something like this. Hey, guys, I know you're enjoying your meal, and the last thing you want to hear is somebody say something to you guys, but I guarantee you what I have to say to you is going to be less than 2 minutes. Start your stopwatch, right? And I'll do that, or less than 60 seconds. And I'll say that. But I'm not a captive audience sort of person when they're forced to be there, unless they're going into a courthouse. Then it's a great place, great time to be able to talk about the law of God. So that's the reason why I don't typically open air, is because I can reach more people through a one-on-one video encounter than I can in an open air preaching session.
Yeah. We do a lot of parades, right? And people are really receptive, before a parade. But then once the parade starts, we step back, right? And we're not there to disrupt or, take away from what they came there for. But there's lots of opportunities just to get out a ton of tracks in that time before the parade.
Yeah. In fact, don't get me wrong. I just purchased a portable microphone and a portable speaker. I haven't even used it yet. I just got it. It was like $1,000. It was a lot of money. And I'm going to be going down to an area where you can use amplification so I can open air preach. And I'm really excited about doing it. I had another one, but I gave it to a friend of mine a young couple, brother and sister rather, who preach outside of a Planned Parenthood every week. And I wanted to give them a sound system. And then Eddie Roman just borrowed it just this past week so he can use it for the Super Bowl outreach. And I'm going to use it down in Santa Monica. And there's a lot of people. I'm not even going to film it. I just want to go out there and just open air preach.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're talking about the hostility. I think it's just a format issue with open air preaching, because you have to project your voice. Whether you have amplification or not, you kind of have to project your voice. So I feel like it's almost like somebody who's not meaning to come across as hostile might accidentally. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but Kurt Vonnegut once wrote about a dog that didn't have a tail. And so it couldn't wag its tail to let other dogs know it was friendly. And therefore it was always getting attacked by the other dogs. So not a perfect analogy, but I prefer personally, I have open air preached. I will open air preach again. I like the one-on-one stuff a little bit better. I think that just speaks perhaps to the different styles. There are some guys who really don't do much beyond the open air, except for some of the consultation that comes from people who approach them afterwards. And I don't have a problem with it. It's just, I think it might just be an issue of style preference for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Mark, we're definitely close to the time. I know you got to run. Last question I wanted to ask you, if I could, are you aware of the impact that Living Waters has had? Not to put you guys up on a pedestal, but does ever kind of sink in how much you guys have an effect when you're out on the street directly with the people that you're witnessing to when you're doing Way of the Master. But the work that you've done has had a wide impact, much wider, around the country and around the world, with people who have learned these evangelism methods from you guys. I just wanted you to speak to that for a moment, if you could, as we wrap up.
Yeah, I'm surprised at the amount of people and the different types of people that know who we are, and then I'm surprised at certain people who don't know who we are. Right. So yesterday, Ray had sent me a screenshot of Brock Purdy. He's the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, going to play in the Super Bowl. And he said, hey, Brock Purdy's following us on Living Waters on our Twitter, X.
Yeah.
Right. And I went, oh, that's kind of cool. And then we have a video that goes up today, Friday. Yeah, today. It's going up today about, is Brock Purdy a Christian? And I've gotten all kinds of DMs from different celebrities that have maybe watched my video or one of our videos. There's one guy particular, I won't say his name just yet, but he's a very well-known singer, and he's new on the scene. And new on the scene, his songs are in the top 50 of the Billboard 100. And I watched him go from 100,000 followers to millions of followers. And so we have been dialoguing kind of back and forth. And I said, hey, listen, you don't preach the gospel at your concerts. And I don't blame you, right? You're a secular artist. You're not going to get liked for that. But maybe you can bring in somebody like me who can show up and say, hey, my friend wants to share a couple words with you and allow me to share. Well, that's on hold. He's working through that to see if that's going to be a good reach for him, a good fill for him. But the amount of celebrities and different actors and people that do reach out, I do get surprised. I go, wow, I didn't know that we reached that circle. I didn't know that person, that actor, or whoever that may be, kind of knows about us. And then on the other hand, I'll come across kind of like one of these celebrity pastors. I'll try to talk to them, and they don't know who Ray Comfort is. And I'm like, you live under a rock. I mean, how do you not know, who this is, but yeah, I get surprised and I get not surprised, back and forth.
There was a football player. I can't remember his name. I want to say he played for the Cleveland Browns, but they have that day, like maybe in October or something, where like players can put like organizations on their cleats. So he had like Living Waters reference on his shoes. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. And we had no idea. I mean, he did that on his own. He's a linebacker, number 51 for the Cleveland Browns. I had a defensive end for the Green Bay Packers contact me, and he flew Ray and I out to Green Bay to watch a game and put us up in a suite and then brought us into the locker room. And we were able to meet the players and stuff. And I had an opportunity to speak to the Denver Broncos one time, before they played the San Diego Chargers. So I'm surprised continually at different doors that open up and other doors that kind of don't. I mean, I went up to, I don't want to mention his name, there's a Christian, well-known Christian band. And I was in the green room because I was going to preach the gospel at this event. There's 13,000 people. They're really for the concert, not for me. And I was sitting there, and one of the band members came up to me. He's the bass player. And I had my 3 boys there, and I said, hey, share with my boys how you stay sexually pure when you're out on the road. And he goes, man, I lost my wife. My kids don't honor me. They don't look up to me. I don't know how to get them back. And I looked at him and I was like, whoa, okay, I wasn't expecting that. You live out in a motor home, RV, because you're so well known in this band. And then the drummer came up to me when I was done preaching, and the drummer said to me, I want to leave the band and preach the gospel and do what you do. And I said, go up to the main singer and tell him you want to preach the gospel. If you don't, I will. And he goes, man, it's not that easy, man. Listen, this is a secular environment, even though it's like we're a Christian band. And listen, they are very well known. And so I contacted them and I said, listen, let me preach the gospel at your concerts. I'll pay for it. No honorarium. You don't have to pay for my plane ticket, no hotel. You know, you have 50,000 people inside these arenas. I will preach the gospel because you won't. And they were not interested. The singer was not interested in having me preach the gospel. And I'm like, listen, I've preached the gospel at concerts where, you know, Lecrae and Toby Mac and 10th Avenue North and Skillet. It's been great times, neat opportunities, but not all bands want you to preach the gospel at their events.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
And it's sad.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I know I think you have a lunch appointment, and I think I heard your stomach grumbling a couple of times. I'm just kidding. I didn't hear that. But so we don't want to make you late. We really appreciate the time you've spent with us. It's been illuminating, and we really, I think Jon and I think I speak for Jon anyway when I say, like, we really appreciate your obedience to the Lord. You know, He's called you guys to have this ministry out there. And, you know, I often, when I'm doing evangelism training, I often, you know, try to implore people that, you know, God doesn't need us out there closing deals. He just needs us to be out there, right? He just wants our obedience, and He'll take care of the rest. And you guys, you know, you go out, we like we discussed, like, sometimes you really don't feel like doing it. And yet you answer the call anyway, because you know it's the right thing to do. And I think ultimately because you love God and you want to please Him. So we're really appreciative of the ministry that you have, and also for you appearing and speaking with us today and making time for us. So thank you again, and thank you to everyone who's watched us today. Thank you to Nick Garland for the music, and to Joe Rooney for producing. Please subscribe and share, and most importantly, share the gospel with someone today. So long, folks. We'll see you next time on Bibles and Bullhorns.